Right, the reason why I've made this video, and it isn't just your standard Thorin's thoughts, is actually within that narrative mechanic sub-series that I created, where I try to like rectify narratives I think have gotten really out of control, and the general consensus I think is just way off base. But this is an interesting one, because actually I'm going to include myself in this. This isn't like where I tell you all, I actually thought Simple was just like maybe the best player ever in like 2017, and you all had to wait years later till the numbers just told you he was, or he won championships. It's not like that. It's not like where I'm just telling everyone else they're wrong. I think I was wrong over the years on this one, and I would explain it like this. This is why I called this video nitr0's burden, not who is nitr0 and just what's nitr0's career, and more of a general overview. Because obviously nitr0 now has retired from Counter-Strike and Team Liquid. I did a 3-part interview with him. I even did that cool little short video, didn't I, about how he was like one of one as an NA leader. That's sort of what actually spurred me to think of this video. But the basic gist goes like this. We spent too much of our time focusing on what nitr0 wasn't and the people who were better than him. And we didn't really take like a look back and realize, haven't we like over-scrutinized this guy? It's kind of like the Team Liquid squads of 2019 and 2018. All we talk about is what they didn't do. They didn't win the major. They didn't consistently beat Astralis. They were a team that sometimes choked away a big match and did it. If you only look at that side, look, it's valid. That is something to do with the discussion. And if we're comparing them to Astralis, if we're comparing nitr0 to the other greatest IGLs of all time, then yes, some of these negatives or knocks are going to be brought up and focused upon, because that's what's going to separate him potentially from a Carrigan, a Glaive, a Zeus. But in doing so, one thing you should never do is ignore what the person is and what they have done. So even though I might be critical of ZywOo in the context of, is he better all time than Simple? Did he have a harder time? Has he done as much? But if you just ask me, ignoring that, who is ZywOo, I could wax lyrical for like 5 hours about how good he is and all the things he's mega at and how unusual it is to be tracking at that higher level from the very beginning of your career and all the I could go on for hours, but we don't do that. That's the worst thing. We've got this weird culture now where it's like you're either the GOAT or you're a bum. Even if you're like second, you're a bum, because people are doing this thing with the nephews, the kids out there who are talking like they're adults and experts. They just seem to think because they picked this guy to be the GOAT, that's like somehow connected to them, and them picking him is sort of like they're the GOAT. But if you, who might know way more or even be better at the game than them, like someone else, you're like the bum, like the guy who lost to the guy that... This is just playground stuff, boys. This has no place in like a discussion among experts. So actually the area where, as I say, I think I made the mistake too is, because I was always building this narrative of, is he going to overcome Glaive? Is he going to get past Astralis? Can they win the major? I actually think now that nitr0's retired, man, I don't think even I gave him his due. I mean, there was times people will know where I called for him to be replaced. Now, to be fair, I did call for him to be replaced with Carrigan, who I actually think is one of the only GOAT like upgrade. It might be the greatest in-game leader ever to play Counter-Strike. And it was also because he had exactly the sort of team Carrigan would love to use, wouldn't he? People like Twisted Legion, of course, Carrigan to get cooking with players like that. So that was more of like an upgrade for Team Liquid. I actually think when you look back now, we've undervalued nitr0. We actually have, and we haven't looked, as this video will now explore, at his burden and what he actually had to do, about the fact that like all the success he had is in spite of who he is and where he came from, what you would have expected his career to actually be. So let's talk about it a bit. nitr0 is a leader. Now, what's funny is he's not going to seem like it because he's not like Cadian doing the big speech on camera, because he's not someone who does all the interviews and has a really forceful personality or knows how to explain what's going on. He's not that sort of a guy. This is a leader in the sense that he does his homework, he does his prep, he organizes the practices, he calls his strats over and over again. People play in the team, he figures out who's doing what, where we go, etc. This is a guy who just did the work. He led by example. He came along every day, put on his hard hat, he went to work, he did his day's labour, he came back the next day, no matter how he felt, he did his work again. And this guy's a leader as a professional. That's what a professional should be. You know how many great players I've known, even IGLs, that slacked sometimes, or you know what, if they didn't like this guy, they treated him differently, or they had like dispute. Some of the other NA leaders just had disputes with star players and constantly tension between them and some of the... There's never been any stories of tension between nitr0 and anyone in these teams. He's even the guy, if you don't know, who when they asked back in 2016 with that infamous meeting behind closed doors with Hiko and Elise and all the rest of the Team Liquid players, like like, should we basically get Steve to break the bank and buy Simple? Like, we actually have a chance now. It's a sort of turning point in history. If we don't, he's probably going to end up in a team like Na'Vi and we're never going to get him. So do we buy him? Now, here's the thing. Famously, I heard the story goes, Elise was against it. People like JDM were like, yeah, I guess he is a bit of an arsehole. When you went down the Hiko, obviously wanted it Simple to stay because he was best mate, so he wanted to win. I've heard Nitro is so legit. He basically said something akin to, yeah, I have problems playing with him too, and like he can be bad. But if we're gonna win, but if we get him, we will win. So I'm more like I'll go with whichever direction the group goes with. That's the mentality this guy has. So just because he doesn't show you the typical markers of a winner, of someone who actually is like doing what it takes to succeed, I don't care about that. I care about what you actually did in the server and what you accomplished. And even though, yes, you look at what they didn't accomplish, there's some glaring holes in the resume of Nitro. But let's look at what he did. And all of a sudden, what a phenomenal career. Like, this would be, no joke, one of the first 4 or 5 IGLs ever in Counter-Strike you'd make a movie about, a documentary about, if you know this story. Because as I say, I would have framed it that way. His burden, what he took on and what he was able to do, maybe even when it wasn't his natural skill set, because people who are old school will know this guy was a rising rifle star with nice mechanics and an aggro style of play. And he wasn't anything like the play you've seen of Nitro the IGL. He was a totally different player. Like, back then, he was more akin to someone like, how about when Ethan came up in NRG? Well, CLG before that, technically, but people forget that. CLG, NRG, Evil Geniuses. And, you know, remember where he was when he left? He was like, ooh, he's getting pretty good. Ooh, he's maybe like a step away from, maybe one day he could be like a top 10 player. Maybe he could be the star player. That sort of areas where Nitro was at when he then had to transition and give up space and let people like Simple come and be a star in his team, and then eventually transition all the way back to he becomes the IGL. He's doing all these different roles. So quite frankly, he was a reluctant IGL. This isn't a guy who dreamed of being an in-game leader his whole career, who's doing that style of play. In fact, his game and his roles didn't even suit it. But what he did was, when Adren had already gone, they lost Simple, they came to this lineup where they had like all these different players. He just initially gave it a go. He was one of the people like Hiko who gave it a go being an IGL. Now, he didn't like it. They all cycled off after a month or so or two. But then what happened later is, then they had the super team lineup the next year with Stanislaw from Optic, who was coming in with big balls. He's supposed to be doing all this big shit. He's already beaten Astralis. It obviously wasn't a good lineup. People might remember that lineup routinely underperformed and was just actually like a crap lineup, despite the fact on paper it looked fire. It looked like this should be fucking mega, like one of the best NA teams ever. So once that stopped working, they did this crazy thing where Zeus shifted Stanislaw to be this like lurky player, which is always his style on the outskirts, but not the IGL, just a player. By the way, he still wasn't fragging great, but he was all right. Stanislaw, he's an all right player. So what happened was Nitro then took over as IGL with the real IGL still in the team over here, working the site, and people might know the story. They immediately had results. They were going to the finals of the ESG Mykonos event and the finals of ESL New York. Both events, by the way, they're beating SK Gaming, the #1 team in the world, the team that FaZe Clan can't beat. They're beating them to get to these finals. So immediately you sort of saw, hey, there's actually something here, mate. There's something to this Nitro IGLing. Meanwhile, Stanislaw, I mean, that failure, yes, he late it with EG, was able to come back and win some championships. I think that failure kind of actually indicted Stanislaw. If you look at the talent that Nitro was working, what he was able to do with it and what Stanislaw wasn't. Also, I really do think, even though people have heard this story, and obviously some people know about the Fnatic game on Cash, where he had the 40 bomb or whatever years earlier, people might know he used to be a fragger. Dude, this guy was an underrated fragger when he was an IGL. Everyone talked about Glaive. What's mad is with Glaive, they'll give Glaive that he was a genius IGL, calling great strats, but then he also could frag a bit. And then when they come to Nitro, they either go like, well, all he did is frag and just everyone just did, you know, Nico go kill type shit. Or they'll be like, well, you know, since he was an IGL, you know, obviously his game decayed and he wasn't a good fragger. Like, guys, go and look at this. In 2018, he had a 1.05 rating for the year. Then in 2019, he had a 1.04 rating for the year. Now, I don't worship the HLTV.org rating, as you may well know, but relative to other people and what we know those ratings represent, remember, this guy has a massive sample size the 2 years I'm talking about. 2018 is when he's in all a billion finals against Astralis, some of the best of fives, by the way. And 2019 is when he's winning tournaments, winning tournament after tournament after tournament after tournament. And who's he playing in these years, by the way? He's playing Nico's FaZe Clan. He's playing the GOAT Astralis lineup. He's playing the NRG team that had gotten really dangerous and was top 4. He is playing MIBR/SK Gaming when they still have Cold Zero, who's good, and Fallen's in all right form, and Fur can still do some stuff. Mate, you run down to Mouse Sports, who had nice lineups around this point in time. Fnatic was still a strong team at times in this period of time, was able to win tournaments. Like, these guys, they were some real opposition here. In fact, if you go and look at a lot of the lineups I'm mentioning there, this is the era when most teams have like 3 or 4 players where if the team gets enough championships, they're all going to be top 20 HLTV players. He's going against those guys routinely, and he's still doing 1.05 and 1.04 rating numbers. Like that's very impressive, actually. Then consider this. He obviously, another part of his burden was a guy who came from being like an AK player has to become the AWPer. Because in our team, we've got this very unusual setup in Team Liquid in these best years where we have Twist, Snaff, and Elige, world-class riflers. We got 3 of them. They don't really have like insane role overlap, but the point is none of them, it doesn't make sense for any of them to be the AWPer. Like, I know for a while they were like, oh, like Naf can AWP. Like, nah, he can AWP certain sides of certain maps. Oh, but what about Twist? He's up for it. Why would you do that though? When a guy's got an AK aim, like him, same with Nico, it's like when you've got the aim you have on your first bullet with an AK, it's just a waste of time to give you the AWP, mate, because we take away your AK, which is criminal enough. And then as an AWPer, you're good. In the case of Nico, you're actually very good, but you aren't simple. You're actually better with the rifle than you are the AK. So in this scenario, that's why he took on the burden to be the AWPer, because his team already was a rifle team. His team already had tactics, especially in 2018, and it's more like he just filled in the gaps. So if it is a CT side overpass, then he's going to have the AWP. If it's nuke and it's the right sort of a game, then he's going to have the AWP in a spot. But he's not going to like force it. It's not like a primary AWPer in that sense where it has to be there every time. They're definitely not playing the game like James style, like get him his AWP, save it. It's not about that. So he also, in my opinion, really understood his game of how to frag as an IGL, how to get kills with an AWP while not taking resources and space and demanding everything be played around for you. That's actually really difficult to do. I've got a lot of respect for that. This isn't like when I complain about Cadian like forcing himself as the main story, or Jim, who's the whole team's style is his AWPing. No, this guy was doing it, but within his system, and within his system, he could have an AWP or not have an AWP and still find a way to make it work. Like, you're already starting to see, man, is this guy a floor raiser? Look at when he came back to Team Liquid, that whack-ass lineup, and they gradually transitioned till they eventually got Daps and Yekindar. And what happened then? Mate, all of a sudden, the lineup that, if you watch them like 4 or 5 series in a row, they had no business being near finals. They all of a sudden are making all these semis runs, playoffs guaranteed, upsets over some of the biggest teams in the world, making finals, almost winning events. Even at the last major, when they started as Bomb 0-2, all of a sudden they're in the quarters. And if they'd have woken up on the other side of the bed, they'd have been in the semis that day. And man alive, I'd like to have seen that semi-final, considering how kind of like slow starting Vitality often was. So I think people, because they look at the top end and go, he didn't get them to the promised land. I mean, first of all, he did win a Grand Slam, but yeah, he didn't get the major. They ignore that. Like, what a floor raiser this guy is when he's IGL. He comes in at proper IGL 2017, immediately we're in finals. He comes back 2022 technically. Like, at this point in time, Liquid's irrelevant. He comes in the lineup, immediately they're starting to do things, and then they get in Yekindar and Daps. Not exactly like you've hired Ziwu and fucking like the greatest coach of all, like Zonic or something, is it? Like, doesn't matter. Immediately relevant, immediately back in the mix, immediately a dark horse. Then you look at his AWPing, and what really shows that this guy could just make it work, whatever role he had to take. And he's like the ultimate fill player, basically. He's up there with my mate NBK in that sense, except the difference is this guy could also be an IGL, whereas, sorry to tell, NBK has a half like 5 years. It didn't work for you, bro. The difference is when you go and look, I looked up the stats. Here are the number of AWP kills he has relative to maps. So in 2015 and 2016, he's not actually playing that many AWP rounds because he's getting like 0.5 AWP kills per round. Then in 2016, he's 0.6 AWP kills. 2017, he's doing it a bit here and there. He's 0.92, so he's almost at 109 maps, 100 AWP kills. 2018 and 2019, when he has all the rifle stars, and he has to be the IGL and the AWPer. So in 2018, he has 840 AWP kills in 189 maps, which means, even though you're remembering that, like, oh, there was one of the best rifle teams ever, that means he's averaging 4.44 AWP kills per map played as like a secondary component and an off role not even thought of as a primary component and not getting results. He's still getting AWP kills each game. 2019, when they had all that success, 616 AWP kills in 183 games. That's 3.34 AWP kills per map. Like, these are actually very respectable numbers when you consider he isn't like Kenny S or Guardian being set up to be the god AWPer. He's just finding a way to make it work and fill in the margins and pad the box score, as it were, for Team Liquid, not for nitr0 the player. Then let's consider he was the in-game leader of the second best team of 2018 and 2019. Because this is one thing I'm sick and tired of. It's that if you're going to tell me that Astralis was just, they were just sort of like off their game at IMI Power Masters, and then after that, you know what, they chose not to attend those events, and so then when you beat them at like Pro League and they don't win Cologne, that doesn't count because they're not properly playing, but then they win both majors, and at the end of the year they come on strong, you go, they're the team of the year, as everyone said. Everyone gave them team of the year. Well, in that case, you were in the second best team, and at times you were world number one in the year of the team of the year of a different team. That's incredibly impressive. So he was the IGL of the second best team of 2 very competitive years of Counter-Strike, which featured the greatest lineup ever in their heyday right over this time span. He won 10 trophies. I know it says 11 on hltv.org because they actually count winning the Grand Slam as a trophy, whereas it's like, I get what you mean by that, but winning the Grand Slam to me is more of a meta-contextual thing as opposed to a specific trophy. Like, you already got 4 trophies in order to get the Grand Slam. So I would say 10 trophies. And obviously he did win a Grand Slam. Now what's notable there is, if you go look, obviously to win a Grand Slam, in theory, isn't as prestigious as winning a major, right? Because the major is the ultimate prize. It's the World Championship Counter-Strike. I get that, and I understand you can't really ever get around that. But I actually do think to win a Grand Slam is harder than winning a major. And spoiler, go and look at all the teams that have won majors since the Grand Slam existed in 2018, and how many of them didn't win the Grand Slam, or how many people were really good teams that could win a bunch of events and didn't win a Grand Slam. Like, even the bullshit Na'Vi Online Grand Slam, they're still beating very, very good teams, and they still at the end have to win a real LAN. So even the weakest one, the Grand Slam is the hardest accomplishment in my opinion in esports, especially the real LAN ones. And the Team Liquid one was arguably the best of the Grand Slams if you actually look who they played, when, where, and all the rest of that jazz. Then there's the whole thing. We have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Of course, he lost to Astralis. And let's be real, he didn't just lose to Astralis. He routinely lost to Astralis. In fact, nearly all the time, he lost to Astralis. Like, I'm not sure what the final stats came out at, but a couple of years ago, I did the numbers. I can't remember if I updated it. I think I did. And when I looked it up, it's not just that he lost. Man, like, because he got to so many semis and finals, nitr0 played Astralis an absurd amount of times. Like, whereas people like, you know, Stanislaw and Carrigan, they were playing, let's say off the top of my head, like, you know, 5, 6, 7 best of X series, not best of 1s, best of 3, best of 5, against Astralis over the years. I looked this up. In series play, nitr0 played something absurd, like 21 series of play on LAN against Astralis, and he only won 2 of them, unfortunately. So he was like 2 for 19. And even in maps, it was terrible, because obviously, famously, sometimes they would 2-0 them with the Inferno nuke as the 2 map picks, right? So he only won 13 maps out of 56. So he went 13 to 43. Now, that sounds terrible, right? Except there's a different context you can apply to that. Because that just sounds like, oh, so you just get battered every time by Astralis. And actually, even other teams have better records and win better maps or win a series here and there. So then how could you be that great? No, because here's the framing I'll put on it, first of all. First things first, anyone else who gets beaten, forget that record, that's insane. Cut it in half, make it 1/3 of those numbers. Anyone else who takes a beating like that, at that sort of a clip, they are going to be mentally broken. They're going to have a psychological wound. Quite frankly, it'll have a knock-on effect beyond the finals and beyond the match against Astralis. You'll start losing to other teams too. And the other teams will see what Astralis is doing to you, and they'll start applying that blueprint to you and breaking you down and attacking you and trying to open that wound up again and try and get you psychologically feeling like, hey, we lose to all these sorts of teams. That didn't happen though. That didn't happen. What happened was this guy never gave up. Like, he might have collapsed maybe occasionally in the game against Astralis. I think even that's debatable. They're the greatest team to ever play Counter-Strike. But I tell you what, every time they lost, it's not just some cliche. nitr0 got up, dusted himself off, and went right back in to looking at the demos, planning the practices, looking at what the next event is, seeing who's in our group, then our bracket, then our semis, and we play Astralis in another final. This time, let's get them this time. That is incredible. I can't overstate how insane it is to consistently take a beating like that, battle all the way back the next tournament, beat all the other teams in the game, by the way, all the other great players, Simple, Nico, everyone except Device of all the great players, beat them all, Ziwu, beat them all, get right back there again. Now you have to play the team that's given you a spanking all those times in the past. They're mega confident, your guys have still not got over it. You get back there again though. You actually have the balls to show up again. Do you know how many boxers, how many MMA fighters, how many champions, like they did have that opponent who beat them again and again. We didn't even get to play. We lost the semis this time, so we never got to. Oh, how convenient. We never had to take a beat. To actually turn up and just take the beating again, man, I have insane respect for people who can actually do that, who don't give up. I mean, by the way, when I talk about the series of losses he had, I looked this up as if to prove it, right? This guy not only kept fighting to get back to the point he could have another crack at Astralis, but I looked this up. He lost the first 12 series in a row to them. In a row. Now, he won 2 of them later. Do you know how many people could lose 12 times in a row, still turn up, still believe you can win, and then win and actually do it? I think that's incredible. This guy has the heart to fight. Remember, there is no 2019, the Grand Slam year with all those titles. There is no 2019 if you don't get through 2018. If 2018 psychically wounds you, causes all fractious problems in your team, you just start thinking, oh, maybe our games are what. You start tweaking things that don't make sense, throwing out maps, discarding what works. All of a sudden, you don't get to have that amazing 2019. Do you know how many teams actually with the same core have an insane second year? Even the greatest teams of all time typically have 1 year. It's why I actually think the other thing about the Astralis thing that's absolutely fugazi is if you like all the stuff Astralis did from Starladder Berlin until the end of the year, where they had like a mini era, I don't think that happens if they just keep playing foot to the pedal earlier in the year. I understand why they did the Blastralis period. My problem was, I thought they pushed it too far. Like, they were close, and there's a world where if they lose that major quarterfinal at the Berlin, who knows? They were close to potentially like going so far that they really came off the boil and became like the 9th best team and wouldn't have had impact in these tournaments. And if they did done that, they wouldn't have had their 2019 at the end period. They'd have just had that early period with the major, that blast. So to me, I thought they really risked it there. But in doing so, I'll tell you what, the gamble paid off, didn't it? They didn't win Cologne. Yeah, that sucked. They let someone else win a Grand Slam. That sucks. But they got the major. They got back in form. They became #1 again. So in the end, the gamble worked, but it was a gamble. Now, there was no gamble for Team Liquid. They just kept fucking chugging the whole time. For those 2 years, they're the only one that just kept going to all the tournaments. They just kept their nose to the grindstone, as the old cliche goes. I don't think people give that enough credit. And then let's consider, it's not like just because they lost the maps that they were all blowouts. There were loads of close games against Astralis. There were loads of times that at half-time they'd have double digits on a map and they'd be in it again and they'd have a chance to... Remember, they were playing the greatest team of all time. Some people, my mate Alan Hender, I'm not sure... I know there's another like analyst who also has them. I forget who. You know, there's actually analysts, by the way, guys, who have Device as the GOAT of CSGO. By the way, his resume would stand up. If you like a certain style of play, I can understand the argument. If you just want someone who's the best, like, self-contained AWPer, but also works with a tactical... Yeah, I get it. If you can consistently actually get yourself into games against someone like that, you're doing some work, mate. In fact, one thing nitr0 himself pointed out in my reflections, which actually makes his style more impressive, is he's the AWPer of his team. nitr0, reluctant AWPer and IGL. And who's the AWPer of the other team? Oh, it's only bloody Device. A guy who has green light to be totally mobile and do whatever he wants and studies demos and heat maps. Or Andy plays for the best tactical team of all time, who, relative to roles, might have the best synergy and chemistry ever in Counter-Strike. And yeah, they're beating you, but they're not just blowing your arse out every single time. And you're right there with them. It even makes sense they should hard count you. nitr0's the AWPer Team Liquid. Device is the fucking AWPer of Astralis. That should be an insane one matchup where you can't beat that guy. That should be an edge to them. The real question you got to ask yourself that no one does is, how was he able to beat Simple so many times and Ziwu? Those guys are stud AWPers too. Those are the best AWPers ever, right? No, I'm kidding, yes, Sarah put in the mix, but you know what I mean? Like, some of the greatest players to ever play the game, and they're mega with the AWP. What were the records like when nitr0's Liquid played those teams? I mean, against Na'Vi, they used to win like 3/4, like 75% of the time or something insane. They used to win the majority of the matches they played. So, yeah, he didn't beat Device. Let's not ignore that he did beat the Simples and the Z. Exactly, and Nico in his rightful prime, like Cold Zera, the rise of people like Kesera. Give me a break. This guy was just fucking incredible. Breezy having his rise with NRG and EG. How many times did Team Liquid get the better of them and take care of the domestic matchup and get to a semi, get to a final, win a tournament, etc.? Then let's consider, as an IGL, this guy, this is a real piece of trivia that people don't seem to know. The GOAT Astralis lineup, that 5-man lineup we all remember. I looked this up. Yeah, Nitro lost loads of series, easily the most series to them ever. But he also, did you know, won the most LAN titles and trophies at tournaments that also featured that GOAT Astralis lineup. He won 3. He won the iBuyPower Masters tournament. He won ESL Pro League Season 9, the one with the famous Vertigo game of the quarters. And then he won ESL Cologne, where they completed the Grand Slam with the 4 titles, although they also just chucked in another Grand Slam title later with IM Chicago. Right, you might think, 3 is the record. That's how dominant Astralis were. And let me ask you this question. The other guys who won them, so Stanislaw won that ESL New York, didn't he? Carrigan won a couple of titles. He won an ESL Pro League later with the Mouse Sports lineup, etc. He won, I'm going to guess, the IM Sydney when he had Exist standing in. Fallen won 0 at any of these tournaments. Zeus won 2, but one of his was that BS Blast Moscow that no one really cares about or whatever. And then the other one was ESL 1 Cologne, the one that they had the epic stacks on Inferno, and they won the semi-final game against them. So, like, you even put the other greatest IGLs of this era and the ones that are beating them, they haven't won as many trophies at tournaments with Astralis, because guess what? They didn't get to play Astralis. You know why? Because a fella called Nitro and Team Liquid took care of them. Again and again and again and again. And yes, when he got to that spot against the team that, if you look, like I just said, stylistically and personnel-wise, most hard counters his team, even with the fucking map pool, yeah, then he lost. So you might say, if you're a Carrigan, it's like, hey, I would have done more fighting. Yeah, but you couldn't get there, could you, bro? Because Nitro stopped you. That's the point to Nitro. It doesn't matter what you hypothetically would have or could have done in the fight. You didn't get there. You didn't get there. So it's irrelevant. So to me, that's another factor people are ignoring. We all praised the Na'Vi with Simple and Nitro and Carrigan when they're in phase, and they got Fallen when he has a little bit of a resurgence with Yanko and MIBR. Do we just look at them and go, wow, they were actually matching up all right against Astralis? Yeah, then where are all the wins? Where are all the trophies? They didn't get them. And in the same way as Nitro didn't get more trophies because of Astralis, Nitro himself was a gatekeeper who gate-kept out all those great legendary stars, Ziwu, Simple, Nico, IGL's, Carrigan, Fallen, Zeus, Stanislaw. He's keeping these guys from winning the titles or getting their crack at Astralis to win their championships. And then let's just throw this in there, since I'm talking about great star players he's neutralizing. This is also what tells me people have underrated Nitro. When I look at the greatest players of all time, in CSGO, they're all in their prime during Nitro's time in this Team Liquid team. Simple, Cold Zero was still pretty good around the time Nitro started to get going. Nico, Ziwu comes along. These are world #1 players during Nitro's tenure as IGL. Remember, he was taken over in 2017 when Cold Zero had that second year. Now, who did he have on his teams when he's doing this? Remember, when you have the results he has in 2019, your players have a very good chance to be rated highly. In 2017, Elysia was ranked 12th. In 2018, NAF was ranked 6th, Twists was ranked 12th, and Elysia was ranked 15th. In 2019, there was a bunch of them obviously higher, and they had the great year. But even so, he's never got anyone close to a world #1. But he's beating world #1s. He's outplacing world #1s. He's winning more trophies than world #1s. He's winning more trophies against Astralis than teams with the world #1s. At this point in time, we have to look and go, look, I think Elysia was amazing. I think Twist at times had some very high peaks. I think NAF's all-around game and consistency of floor is incredible. These guys aren't Simple. They're fucking Nico. I even think we actually, because I call the other ones aliens and say Device is human. Device is better than these players. Like, Device is a really special player, guys. If those guys didn't exist, we'd be talking about Devices like, oh my God, this game's impossibly consistent. How does he do it? And it's the intelligence applied. Like, we just don't worry about that because we've got Simple and because we've got Ziwu. This guy did so much. Now, another thing that happened was, it's not like Astralis just went to some other tournaments, but remember, over those 2 years, they were the team of the year in 2018 and 2019. Well, if your team of the year, how did Team Liquid become #1 in the world? Because Astralis was ranked #1 on HLTV from the 23rd of April 2018 to the 3rd of June 2019, and then they regained their spot on the 7th of October. So what happened between the 3rd of June and the 7th of October? Oh, that's right. Team Liquid became #1 in the world. Now, I don't want to hear also, yeah, but that's because Astralis didn't attend. Well, in that case, we'll never know what Astralis could do. You think, well, no, they definitely won all the events. That's not even how it works. Remember, by that logic, if I go back in time and pick an event out that we already know they didn't win and look beforehand, wouldn't logically you say they'd win it? Like, if I went back in time and looked at that DreamHack Masters Stockholm in 2018 and said, look at all the field of teams. In fact, I'll even tell you a little hint. They play North North's MSL's North in the final, and he's going to AWP. You tell me, oh, well, they definitely win that one. They didn't, though, did they? They didn't win that event. What about later, ESL Cologne? Did they win that one? Oh, no, they didn't. Zeus won that one, didn't he? What about later when they came back to ESL Cologne when it was the Liquid? Oh, it's just because Astralis isn't there. Oh, Liquid won it and Astralis didn't even make the finals. You can't do that. You can't give people championships they didn't even play around at the tournament on. You can only give the championship to the person who went to the tournament and won the tournament. Now, you could certainly say, but they didn't have that team. But yeah, that makes it not as impressive, but they won it at the end of the day. They won it. Then let's consider this. Look at the style of play that he was doing all this with. You couldn't get more radically different because of the personnel and the approach he was choosing that year with that coach. So in 2017, they still have JDM in the lineup, and he's a primary AWPer, like a real primary AWPer. So you have JDM open. A lot of the game was based on, like, give him a chance to get the mid-round pick. Stanislaus lurking, and it's a disgruntled guy who's had IGL taken from him. And Twists is having a little peak as a young guy. Now, what do you get from that? Oh, that's right. You get finals. You're in position to win championships. You're beating the #1 team in the world. Elysia ends up being, like I said, like 12th player on HLTV or whatever. You don't have anywhere close to the best player in the world. You're doing that with this really like busted lineup. Then JDM goes out and Stanislaw goes out, and we make this lineup where Via, Steel, come to Taco. We end up with this lineup now where we know the 2019 and the 2018 lineup, right? People forget this. 2019 was very different from 2018. 2018, the joke was, like all the teams out there, Team Liquid was watching Astralis demos, and they were seeing what Astralis was doing. They were saying, hey, we've got to get some of this util. We've got to get our tactics style like that. We've got to have like a mid-round style where we punish when they peek out, when we're controlling the map, etc. They were doing a really tactical approach in 2018. It was very good. It's actually why, in my opinion, they were able to beat the likes of the Navis and the FaZe clans, because they could actually punish stars. And in my opinion, 2018 was actually Naf was probably the best Liquid player. That was the one where he had the really awesome year. I think he even was on the HLTV. That was the year he had like a stunner one where, because the floor of his game was so exceptional, it just meant that, like, of course you're going to win most of the series you're in. But you're doing a really tactical style, which makes sense as to why he would be the best that year when he's coming in late, etc. And he knows what he's doing. He lurks on the right parts of the map. You look at that lineup and then go to 2019 when they bring in Stupid 2K. It's a totally different team. Stupid 2K style's more up-tempo, it's aggro, it's a little bit looser, it's secondary calls, no util approach. You just rush in dry, but you use your raw skill. If you lose, you all buy deagles, you play classic NACS and get picks, and suddenly you're back in the game. Elysia's your best player this year. So you've got sort of Twists peaking at times in 2017. You got Nafs, your guy, in 2018, and then in 2019, Elysia's your best player. Mate, this guy just gets it done with whoever he has. It's like you tell him what the personnel is, and then he'll figure out a style of play, make it work, get the flop to a world-class level, and then maybe lose to Astralis. Like, well, bloody hell, while IGLing and AWPing, which isn't even supposed to be his job at all. The more you look at it, the more impressive it gets. Then you look at the map pool over these times, it was switching up as well. So when they were in 2018, part of their problem was a lot of the maps they were good at were the Astralis maps. They were awesome at Inferno. They had a solid nuke. They could play these other maps when they needed to. Then you go to 2019, now they're just gods of Dust 2. Their Overpass is insane. Their Inferno's very good. Their Mirage is quietly, when they don't even pick it, just unbeatable because of this mad fragging style they've got. You look across the board. This is a guy who really, really didn't have those set things that I don't play map X. Like Nico saying Overpass is bad for like 7 years now. He doesn't go, oh, I've just never figured out how to play that. Like, people are going to go, yeah, but what about Nuke? They always also, yeah, to Astralis. Go look in 2018 when they play Nuke against other squads. Go look when they play against Na'Vi and Simple, etc. By the way, that one day became Simple's best map. He became a god on that map years later. You go look when they play against these teams. Hey, they're mixing it up. They're winning these games. They're actually in good position. You can see why they get tricked and think you have to let Nuke through over and over again. Then consider as an NAIGL. Like, I'm comparing him against the GOATs ever to do Counter-Strike, like Carrigan, Glaive, the best ever to do it. How about we just compare him to NAIGLs for a second? So Stanislaw won more against Peak Astralis. Right, where's Stanislaw's Grand Slam? Did I miss something? Did Stanislaw win a major and I just wasn't paying attention? And you guys, what? And where are Stanislaw's trophies, by the way? I'll tell you right now, he's got 3 LAN trophies ever. Ever. And he had plenty of talent over the years, by the way, plenty of opportunity. You look at Sean Gares, we all love Sean Gares, one of my favourites. Even consider him a mate, right? 0 notable land trophies in CSGO, by the way, guys. 0. It's not like he had bombs. He had Skadoodle when he was a world-class AWPer. He had Shroud when he was really on the rise. He had a bunch of Hiko when he was one of the best in the world. He had Swag. This guy had some talent too. 0 notable land trophies. Daps, a guy I also think is an insane floor riser, a guy who can put together squads like almost no one else. 0 notable land trophies as an IGL. So this guy won 10 trophies. I'm ignoring the one online EPL. I don't really care about online results. He won CS Summit 2, which was the one that had World Champions, Cloud9. It had SK Gaming there when they had the real lineup with Bolts. Doesn't matter, won that LAN. Yeah, it wasn't a huge LAN, but some of the teams there were good. He won the Supernova event in 2018. That one wasn't that good. That was more like a tier 1.5 event, so who cares about that one? Then they won iBuy Masters, which had Astralis. I don't care. They're like, yeah, but it was scuffed. And at the end of the day, it was still a real match. They played it. Astralis tried, and Astralis lost. Astralis looked sad. That was a win. That's what you call a win. Then they had IM Sydney. Oh, there's no Navi, there's no Astralis. Okay, fine. That's their loss. Doesn't matter for nitr0, just won the event. Then you have DreamHack Masters Dallas. Yeah, there was no Astralis. Who cares? At this point in time, Astralis isn't world class. They're actually a team that's sus. You saw them at ECS, what they were doing. Wins this event. ESL Pro League Season 9, you have Astralis there. I mean, what are you supposed to do now? Now Astralis turns up but then loses. Now all of a sudden say, yeah, but they're out of form. I mean, I told you they were doing the Blastralis. You guys simultaneously gaslight me. They didn't do the Blastralis, but then also we're out of form, so it doesn't count. And they were at events anyway, but suddenly they're at events and they lose. Yeah, but that also doesn't count. Nothing fucking does it? I tell you what counts. What actually happens in reality. That's what counts, number one. Then, not number two, not number three. Number 100 is what could have happened. That's what comes then. Then, of course, he went to ESL 1 Cologne. Now, this one you can't even tell me, but they were still out of form. ESL 1 Cologne's the third best tournament of that fucking year, especially because Katowice was a major. That if you were making a list of things to accomplish, it would be win IM Katowice, win Starlight Berlin, and win ESL 1 Cologne. So the idea of Astralis is just being chilling. Fucking hell, they were in the semi-finals, guys, and they still didn't win. They couldn't get to the final to play nitr0's Astralis. So he won that massive event and won the Grand Slam. Then he won Blast LA during this period where they win the Grand Slam events. That was actually the one that wasn't even just a normal blast of ones. That was where it had a real semis that was best of 3 and a final that was best of 3. Won that one. Then he had IM Chicago. Everyone except Astralis pretty much is there. They don't just win this event, by the way. They murk Ents, one of the best teams in the world. They destroy them in this final. It's no wonder Ents actually fell apart after that. This wound alone must have just really driven a divide amongst them. So let's just summarize his career for a second. He was an in-game leader when he wasn't supposed to be and became world class and accomplished incredible things. He was an AWPer when he wasn't supposed to be and fragged well in 2 years with the best lineup ever played with an all-time great world #1 type AWPer who hard counted the give me a break, made that work as well. Took 2 different styles against the GOAT Astralis and was right within touching, you know, almost grabbing for the crown, for the throne for himself. Then you had that whole thing where his team's being hard countered by Device's style, but against everyone else it works. That's why I said in my little video, if you see that this guy got wrecked, you've got to ask who's on the other side of the fucking boxing match in this analogy. Like, yeah, maybe he died. He's facing fucking Achilles. He's facing like a demigod who can't lose in Astralis. This guy's more like Hector. He's just the greatest of the humans, doing the best he can. Still trying anyway, not being intimidated by the fact you're not even... You just know fate tells you you're not supposed to win these games. You look at those guys. You've got some very good players. They've got Device. They've got Zonic. They've got Magus, Dupree. Bloody hell. Then every one of their players, in theory... Maybe not Zipnix, because they don't really do it for support players. In theory, every one of their players is going to be in a Hall of Fame relative to his role. If you do buy roles of support, then Zipnix would be as well. And what was nitr0 accomplishing against them? He even sometimes beat them and took world #1 from them. This guy's insane. This guy is so fucking... What he actually did accomplish is so special, you can't ignore it by only looking at what he didn't accomplish.
Hey, it's simple, you're watching Thorin channel. Shut the fuck up, you fucking bitch.
For many years of my career in esports, it really was just me. I did it all. I was the one person driving myself forwards. I didn't have people around me to help me. But actually, one thing I've learned over the years is the value of a support network. And mine is, of course, the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community. So this video, like many on my channel, was made possible by Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Torin, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question for my regular AMA? Do you want to find out teasers? Who are the guests for the upcoming interviews? I often do. Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we can talk about whatever you want in esports. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today. Support my content via the Patreon link in the description box below.